The Godzilla franchise is one of the longest running series ever, so jumping in can be a daunting task. So I wanted to put together a series of rankings for the franchise, this first one going through all 15 movies from the Showa series, and later I'll be putting out rankings on the Heisei, Millennium, and modern day releases. With that said, let's get to the rankings from worst to best, because there's a lot to go through. And remember, this is just my opinion. With a series so varied, we're bound to disagree, so I'd love to see your ranking or your top 3 or bottom 3 films in the Showa series in the comments below. And without much else to say, let's just jump into it. So starting at the bottom of the barrel is 1969's All Monsters Attack. It's mostly his clip show with an addict talking Manila helping a young boy face a bully while he also faces a bully of his own. It's probably the laziest film they ever released and one of the shortest, barely coming in at 69 minutes, which is actually good in this case, but overall this is just a big whiff and the most childish of the franchise, and you can definitely and should definitely skip it unless you're looking just to watch them all in a row, which is fine. And coming in just above the previous film is 1967's Son of Godzilla. Much like All Monsters Attack, it just feels like this was made exclusively for children and comes across pretty small in scale and cheap. The suits are really starting to take a dip in quality here as well, while the monsters they fight were probably at their most boring in terms of designs, giant spider, big mantises. The only part that I think is somewhat sweet is when Godzilla and Manila begin to hibernate at the end of the film, but otherwise this one is also very much skippable. And coming in at unlucky number 13 is Ebra, Horror of the Deep. So I somewhat enjoyed this one, but much like Son of Godzilla, it feels like one of the cheapest entries and has one of the weakest villains. What puts it a little higher than them is the human characters on the island seem a bit more fleshed out, and I think the native girl on the island is actually a good addition and pretty attractive as well. I also kind of like how Godzilla defeats Ebra in the end, but the dialogue at the end with how Godzilla is a good guy while Mothra saves the islanders from him is a little bit forced. And again, if you're just looking to watch the good films, this is one that you can probably skip as well. Next up is Godzilla vs. Megalon. So originally this movie was supposed to be a solo movie with just Jet Jaguar, but they shoehorned Godzilla and Rodan into it, slapped his name on the title, and it really shows. With so much time devoted to just Jet Jaguar and his creation, but I think that Megalon and the Seatopians make for an interesting villain to the monsters and humans. There is a pretty sweet fight at the end between all 4 villains and heroes, which is fun to watch, and I'd say you can maybe watch this one if you really want to, but it isn't necessary viewing for the series. Coming in at number 11 is Godzilla vs. Hedorah. This is probably the strangest Godzilla movie in terms of editing, with cartoony transitions and weird musical segues, but I don't really ever find it boring like some of the other ones at the bottom of the list, and it's actually pretty cool watching Hedorah evolve throughout the movie. Of course, it's mostly known for the part where Godzilla flies backwards, but after you get over that, there's actually a movie that is somewhat entertaining here. So I'd say, if you're a fan of Godzilla, this one is actually worth watching, but it is very much bred in early 70s nostalgia, so just be warned. And now getting to the top 10, we have Godzilla vs. Gigan. I really like Gigan as a monster, I think he's actually pretty cool, and the battle between Ghidorah, Anguirus, whatever you say, Gigan and Godzilla is the highlight of the movie, but the plot seems a little familiar at this point, with aliens taking over the monsters again and Godzilla having to fight them, and his suit is looking pretty rough in this entry, plus the talking scenes between Anguirus and Godzilla is one of the weirdest decisions they've ever made, so those things hurt the film, but overall, it's actually not too bad, so you can check it out if you want. And taking the number 9 spot is Terror of Mechagodzilla. So this is one of the entries that really feels like a huge retread, and yeah, it's the 15th entry in the series, so it's bound to feel a little stale, but not only does it feature aliens taking control of monsters again, it also features the second entry in a row where he fights Mechagodzilla. And while the ending is pretty sentimental with the human characters embracing one another, it's not enough to save them from this being the weaker of the 2 Mechagodzilla Showa entries. And now we get to the second entry in the series, Godzilla Raids Again. Coming in at number 8, this one feels probably the most like they didn't really know where to take the franchise after the original was such a success, so they bring out a new Godzilla, they have him briefly fight Anguirus, but the focus is definitely on the humans still, and it gives a cheesy love story with some forced humor, unlike the original that kind of felt like a pure drama when the people were on screen, so the shifting tones sort of hurt this entry, but I think Godzilla's second rating is still worth a watch, so you should check it out, at least to see how they start the series up again after the original Godzilla dies. And a lucky number 7 is Destroy All Monsters, and Godzilla is under alien mind control again. Along with his buddies on Monster Island, it really seemed like they played that card just a little too much. But this is one of the better ones, and they weren't afraid to go big in scale, with them destroying multiple cities, and once free of the alien mind control, they all team up and they kill, or they take down King Ghidorah. It's basically just becomes a big wrestling tournament in the final, so it's a lot of fun. It's pretty cheesy, but it does scratch that primordial itch, and this one has a lot of fun stuff going on in it, so I'd say go check it out if you want. And at number 6 is Mothra vs. Godzilla. So this is one of the earlier let's face Godzilla off against another property to boost sales films. And for the most part, this entry is actually pretty successful. Mothra and the two fairies add an interesting and spiritual dynamic to the series, and the human story about greed over the ownership of both Mothra and the fairies is an interesting one. Plus Godzilla is a bad guy here, and that makes Mothra the good guy or girl, and it's always nice to see Godzilla in the more villainous role without having to be put under alien mind control, that is. So yeah, definitely if you've seen the newest King of the Monsters and you want to see how Mothra came into the series, this one's pretty interesting to watch in that respect. And continuing on with more spiritual films, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The first appearance of the Mechagodzilla is a banger, and the inclusion of King Caesar both as a protector and as a character that Godzilla has to fight with makes for a nice duo. Of course, it falls in line with the kaiju under alien mind control film again, but I think it's done pretty well here, and the human storyline feels a lot like a James Bond thriller with a Planet of the Apes antagonist. So yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. It definitely wears its influences on its sleeve, but yeah, go check this one out. If you're gonna watch any of the later Showa movies, this one's one of the best ones. And at number 4 comes King Kong vs. Godzilla. After a 7-year hiatus, the franchise came back newly reinvented, and the darkness of the first century was completely gone. In its place were more jokey characters and monster battles. Godzilla is still the bad guy, but people look at him more as a nuisance than anything else, so they shipped King Kong over to duke it out with him. And yeah, the costume on King Kong is probably one of his silliest looks, but I think overall the fights are fun. The human plot, while predictable, is there just enough to lead the story along and get our two monsters to duke it out. Plus I think it's probably a good time to rewatch this before the remake comes out next year. Coming in at the top 3 is Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, which is Ghidorah's first appearance inside the franchise, and I think also, yeah, his first appearance within film. And yeah, this film would go on to define what Godzilla would become for the rest of the Showa series, for better or for worse, turning him from a bad to a good guy to face off against Ghidorah. And yeah, I think it actually works out pretty well here. Also, the human side of this movie is also somewhat interesting, with an assassination plot unfurling between the monster battles. So if you're going to watch any of them, I say this is a pretty good one to choose. It may not be perfect, but it is an interesting and fun movie to watch. And the second best film in the Showa series for me is Invasion of Astro Monster. And yes, this is the one where Godzilla dances. But at the same time, it brought a lot of new ideas to the series, and this is the first plot that involves the monsters being mind controlled by aliens, and the Exilians are probably the best aliens of the original franchise, and maybe of the whole franchise. Plus Nick Adams' acting adds an air of levity to this entry, and the romance between him and the Exilian is a highlight of the film. The only thing I don't love is how Ghidorah is used immediately after his appearance in the previous film, but they're able to keep it pretty fresh, and this entry is quite a lot of fun. And now we get to our number 1 spot, and most of you probably saw this coming, but it probably goes without saying that the original Godzilla is still the best, no matter which version you watch, the Japanese cut or the American version with journalist Steve Martin. The feelings and terror of the characters still play out on screen. It also helps that it's black and white and shot at night, as Godzilla looks his most realistic for a Showa film in this movie, especially compared to the middle films that really dropped the ball in terms of his suit. But if you're gonna watch any film from the Showa series, make it the first one. If you like it, keep going. The series may be long, but it's probably one of the most interesting and enduring series I've ever covered. So what do you guys think of my rankings? Do you agree, or do you have your own opinions about the franchise? Feel free to leave your thoughts down below. And before I sign off, I want to thank MindCGGH and a Toonie Cat for joining the Patreon recently, as well as all my other supporters. I'm currently doing a vote on the Patreon for the next horror-related character, so you can check that out in the description if you're watching this pretty close to whenever I post it. And also, apparently my screen tablet, the GAOMON PD1560, is on sale throughout all of July, going for around $305 on Amazon in America, I believe. So I've left a link down for that in the description. And until next time, keep on keeping on.